Yeah, good evening and good morning and good afternoon. This is Harry from Hasper TV. Okay, you might have seen my last video, but yeah, I'm filming this back to back. So, Spurs defender issues. We're nitty gritty down to the football, right? So, as you know, we've been linked with Tapsoba, Van der Ven. Anderson was the latest link the other day. So, I've kind of been holding off on talking about this because I have my own opinions on what defenders Spurs should be looking at because we don't seem to know what we're doing and what defenders Spurs not only need to be looking at, but need to sort of okay. You look at the back four, and obviously in centre halves you have pairings. Okay, you have two centre halves, obviously who normally start. People point to players like Vertonghen and Alderweireld, who had a very long term understanding, which is why at the time signing Alderweireld made so much more sense. But now we don't really have like a partner, for example, for Romero. Now, on paper, you'd imagine Romero would be the starter next season, because he's probably on paper the best defender we have at the club right now, and with at least with Hughes like a year or two behind him, right? So you think, oh, we need to buy a partner for Romero. Now, obviously, people are saying Van der Ven because he's sort of like a contrast to Romero. People are saying, I have to confess, I don't really know much about Van der Ven, but from reading, he's probably the inexperienced of the three defenders we've been linked with. And personally, I wouldn't want to take a punt or something like that. But further to that, Spurs Levy's still negotiating for him, which is a bit ridiculous because if you read reports a couple of weeks ago, the deal was supposedly done. But anyways, here we go again. Tapsoba is probably the most expensive one on the list. He's probably the one I know the most because I've probably seen more European football than I have. Yeah, in Germany with Wolfsburg for Van der Ven, because at least Leverkusen were playing in the European competition like last season, the Europa League. So Tapsoba is quite more well known. He's probably the most experienced out of the two of those we've been strongly linked with. Do I think he's the option that we should get? Well, I'm going to go on to that in a bit later. But if I was to pick out those two, Tapsoba any day of the week. Now, Anderson's an interesting one. It's the latest link. And as you know, Spurs have been looking at Anderson for a number of years. I think 2-3 years ago, yeah. And I think it must have been under Mourinho, I think, yeah. And obviously we didn't go for him. We ended up with Rodon in the end because they went for Skriniar, I think, and they came back with Rodon. But yeah, that's another story. But is Anderson the right option? Now, Anderson out of the three of them at least has Premier League experience, and that I think counts important to me, at least. But is it the answer to our defensive problems? I don't know. And playing a club like Palace is totally different to playing a club like Tottenham. He's supposedly going to cost about 30 million. I think he's the most smoothest deal to be done, if I'm being honest, because can Spurs recently negotiate for Palace for a Premier League proven defender? I don't think so. Mark Guehi, ironically, his partner Spurs were linked with before, and he's going for like 60 million. I was reading, but he's another one who's quite inexperienced. But at least he has some sort of Premier League experience compared to someone like Van der Ven. Now, for me personally, I'm not against signing these young players, but I think we need some experience. And I'm going to put this out there. Bonucci was released from Juventus last week. Not last week, it's only been like 3 days. And as you guys remember, back in 2004, 2005, Nuruddin Naybet signed for Tottenham on a free transfer from Deportivo La Coruña. Correct me if I'm wrong. And I don't know if you guys have read of this before, but Ledley King cites Naybet as a very important person to his development as a player. And the Spurs defense are crying out for a leader, someone to drill them, someone to tell them what to do. And I think Bonucci, for me, obviously we're not going to get Chiellini because I think he's retired, but Bonucci on a free transfer seems like a really good deal because this is what I would do with the back four. I still think Spurs need a left back and a right back, regardless of what centre halves they get. I think centre halves is more important because you kind of get away with having Emerson on the right. But for me, left back, I'd give Reguilon another year. Emerson probably going to have to stay another year. But as starters, no. I still think we need a left back and a right back. And the reason I say this is because I think Doji and Porro are going to play further up. The Spurs don't need any more attacking reinforcements. Just play Porro and Doji further up. Because I think Doji will probably go the Bell route where I think he'll play further up, then he'll play further back. And then depending how he develops, he'll play either further up or further back later in his career in the next 4 seasons, right? And the same with Porro, he looks a lot better playing higher up the field last season. And you have to look about the defensive acumen, or lack of in this case, because playing in a four, the defenders have to be proper defenders. Now, obviously, Spurs centre halves options are diabolical. Excuse the pun. So Dyer is obviously apparently injured, but he's apparently staying, which is horrible to read. Davies, Longley apparently is another one who I didn't mention earlier, but he has been linked. He's, to me, is not the experienced player, like I said, I'd be taking. But this is how I would have designed the four defenders, the four centre halves. Sorry, I'd keep Romero because I think he's got 2 years behind him at Tottenham. He's probably the best of the four, so you get the best of the bad bunch at least. And maybe with some experience behind, alongside him, maybe he'll calm down. So I said, go to get someone like Bonucci. I think Bonucci on the free is a bargain. I know he's 36. Someone will say that to me, but like I said, you cite back to Naybet. Naybet was very influential in King's career. Then I would get Anderson. I think Anderson for 30 million is a good deal. At least he'll come in with Premier League proven. He can pass the ball. If we look at the market, I can't really think of anyone else that's available at Premier League proven. And so us and Newcastle are looking at him. And I think the last one, I wouldn't get Van de Ven, I'd get Tapsoba, because you'd have two sort of strong centre halves, and Tapsoba and Romero are quite similar. And then you'd have one experience and Bonucci to coach the rest. Then you'd have someone like Anderson, who at least has Premier League experience. And you'd have your four centre halves. Some of them similar, like two of them quite similar, and two of them slightly different. And you've got a little bit of experience there in the Premier League. And also, with some bit, Anderson's got a bit of passing range, and then you have Bonucci, who, like I said, would be the experience of the four. And even when you got Bonucci in just for 1 or 2 years and loaned out Tanganga, like a proper Premier League loan, then at least you're fine. And I guess you could shift Davies as a left back at least for a season and get away with it if you don't want to keep Reguilon. But I just don't. I think Spurs aim to just sign youngsters, especially in the centre half position, is completely wrong, because the past is showing, like I said, with Naybet, with King. And not just that, if you look at all these winning sides, they do have an experienced head in there. And considering such a car crash Spurs defence was, you need to bring in at least players with Premier League experience. Bonucci has got everything in terms of experience as well on top of that. And then with Tapsoba, you have the new player in there in terms of you can mould him a bit more. Also, he has Champions League experience. Instead of going to Van de Ven, who is the most raw of the lot. And like I said, Bonucci on a free, it doesn't cost you anything. You can still buy two centre halves and you get the third one free. Yeah. So, and you can still shift Dyer, Sanchez, Davies, Tanganga, Rodon. Just get them all out. Even if you get just 5 million off each of them, you pay for at least one of the centre halves you're going to get. And you just have to fund enough for the other one, and then you just get Bonucci on a free. But that's how I would do it. But regardless of what I've just said, it's a criminal that Spurs don't have a centre half on that plane. And to me, it just shows poor planning. We'll see Postecoglou. People say he was assessed the team, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that Spurs need centre halves. We can see the 66 goals last season. So this whole notion, we need to assess the squad, to me is a load of rubbish. I just think Levy's, his massive ego. He's trying to negotiate with Tapsoba, Van de Ven, and maybe Anderson. It's another. Like I said, even though I'm for Anderson because at least he has Premier League experience. Maybe there's another Premier League centre half someone can name in the comments that would be better suited than Anderson. But with those options, like the four I mentioned, as that would be my four centre halves, you'd have everything in there. And it wouldn't actually cost that much. It would probably cost you 80 million or something like that. And that's it. And you could probably fund at least half of it through sales. So you're not really spending that much. But the Spurs board on, But obviously Anderson, for me, even though I said I'll take him, I think he would probably be a club signing. Postecoglou hasn't come out and said, and I think it's quite strange that he hasn't come out and said the media, come out and said that Postecoglou wants a specific player from Celtic or the Scottish League. Even with Carter Vickers, that wouldn't surprise me. But to me, it's very strange. But anyway, maybe there's someone in the Scottish League that I haven't thought of that we might get. But yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, the centre half situation is absolute shambles. Those would be my recommendations because unfortunately we're still at this point where we haven't got any. And yeah, Levy out.